Okay, Rabotai. So Parashat Terumah, we are now talking about for the next few 4 or 5 weeks. I guess you would say it's less interesting to most people. The stories are over, Matan Torah is over, and now it's Terumah. It's talking about building Hashem a Mishkan, building the tabernacle. Terumah, Tesaveh, two parashiot straight away, all about the tabernacle and the korbanot and all these details. Kitisa, we have the breaking of the tablets and the golden calf, which is a little drama, right, story. And then goes back to Vayakel and Pikudeh, which is more accountant stuff, counting and details. And a lot of space in the Torah dedicated to the Mishkan. Rabbi Avigdor Miller says, when Hashem created the world, Perashat Bereshit, it's 31 Pisukim. The whole creation of the world in our Torah is 31 Pisukim. We have 4 parashiyot about a Mishkan. The spies, the episode with the spies didn't happen yet. The episode with the spies is what caused them to stay even for 40 years in the desert. They weren't supposed to stay 40 years, apparently. And so all 4 parashiyot for a Mishkan that's going to last 4 days, 3 days, 11 days. We're supposed to go straight into Israel. What is it? Like when the Jewish people got these laws, they should have been like, how long are we going to be here for? Like, what are you talking about? Aren't we going straight into Israel? So the Lubavitcher Rebbe, he quotes Rambam, and he opens up and he says, obviously, if the Torah dedicated 4 parashiyot to the building of the Mishkan, build for me a holy place, and I will dwell in their midst. It wasn't just a mitzvah that was for the desert, never to apply again. It's a mitzvah forever. Hashem will never dedicate so much space in the Torah for a temporary mitzvah. The Midrash says, make for me a mikdash, a holy place, and I will dwell. And the Midrash says, I will never move. Any zaz, I will never move from it. Always. Le'olam, forever. The Lubavitcher Rebbe says that according to the Rambam, he believes in the words of the Rambam, this mitzvah of making the mikdash, making the Mishkan, is for all generations, for all times, and for all places. It's not really to do with the desert. And the mitzvah for us to make a Mishkan applies even for us, for me and for you today, 2024, is to make a Mishkan. How do we make a Mishkan? Well, first of all, as we know, we have Mikdash Me'at. We have many temples everywhere. We're in one right now. The Knesset, a shul, is a Mikdash Me'at. It's a mini temple. But it's not enough. Because as we know, V'shachanti b'tocham, all the Mefarshim jump on this word. It's one of the most popular things to say on this parasha. V'shachanti b'tocham, it says, I will dwell in their midst. It should have said, V'shachanti b'tocho, I will dwell in its, make for me a house and I will live in it. Why does it say, make for me a house and I will live in them? What? 1 house, 2 houses. Them means, Akiva, it means us. V'shachanti b'tocham means, if you make for me a house, I will live within each of you. And so our mission is to make a Mishkan anywhere we go. The Lubavitcher Rebbe says, in each one of our houses, in each one of our apartments, wherever we live, there has to be a Mishkan. Which means, do we have a set place? The Mishkan is a set meeting place. It was a set place where we went to meet Hashem. Do we have a set place in our house where we learn our Torah, where we do our prayers if we're ever praying at home? There's a concept in the shul called makom kavua. Yeah, you should have a set place for your prayer. By the way, makom kavua, a set place, it doesn't literally mean the same exact chair that you sit in every day, which means if you come to shul and someone's in your chair, please don't kick them out of the chair. Makom kavua is a 4 amot radius according to the poskim. So according to us, Sfaradim, it's a little less. According to Ashkenazim, that's even more. Let's say 6 to 8 feet radius of where you usually pray. It doesn't have to literally be in your seat. But there is a concept that we should have a makom kavua, a set place. I've said this story a few times, but it's one of my favorite stories. So I want to say it again. I love this story. There was a guy that died, an Ashid, who passed away, a very wealthy guy who died, and he left behind no children. One person comes from out of country and says, that was my uncle. And so he's the only heir on file. And so Bet Din's about to give him everything. And then another guy comes and challenges him in court and says, no, that's my uncle. We're cousins. He says, who are you? He says, who are you? So now they have a battle. So they go to Bet Din and they say, let's ask them questions. What was his mother's name? What was his sister's name? All sorts of family tree questions. Both of these guys knew every answer. Either they're both imposters or one of them was doing their homework very, very well. Bet Din said, we don't know the difference between these two guys. So the Ab Bet Din, the rabbi, says to both of them, one at a time, come with me. Come with me to the shul. He opens the door of the shul and he says, point to his seat. One of the guys, he jumped around. He sat in a lot of places. The other guy says, right there. Second row from the back, two seats over from the rabbi in the behind. It's exactly where he sat every day. Makom kavua. The value of a makom kavua, when you belong in a place, that's your place. I remember as a kid, when we used to get off from camp or school early, and the doors locked to the house, I'll go to the shul. That's my second home. That's how it should be. So I'm not personally a fan of shul hopping. I don't like it. Shul hopping, Rabbi Victor Miller was very against shul hopping. In the back of the books, Rabbi Victor Miller speaks. There's a bunch of questions they asked him on the tapes. He used to have a lot of recordings and they transcribed it. And someone asked, he says, my daughter is interested in dating someone. He says he doesn't have a shul. He just hops around. Rabbi Victor Miller says it's very, very bad. Someone who doesn't have a shul is not anchored anywhere. He's just hefker. He's all over the place. Rabbi Victor Miller was not a fan of shul hopping. Choose a shul and go there. Makom kavua. Says the Lubavitcher Rebbe, in our house, and Shulchan Aruch also says this, and Maran Chama talks about this also. Even in that, during COVID, this was very prevalent. Even in our house, there should be a makom kavua. If you ever pray at home, even the men, you should have a certain place. If I ever pray at home, this is where I pray. Not one time the kitchen, one time the dining room. Have a makom kavua even in the house. The Lubavitcher Rebbe goes further and he says, do you have a place for your sifarim? When you put your sifarim in a bookshelf, or this shelf is for my sidurim and my tilims and my humash. That's ve'asuli mekdash ve'shachanti betocham. If you know anything about the Rebbe, you know he was big about tzedakah boxes. Every time his shalichim would go out to the places, hospital rooms, whatever, they'd put a pushka box everywhere. The Lubavitcher Rebbe says, there are three pillars that the world rests on. Torah, avodah, and gemach, gemilut hasadim. Torah, prayer, avodah is prayer, and kindness. At the very least, he says, every one of our houses should have the three pillars of the world. So in our house, we have to make sure we have a set place for our Torah. If you're ever going to sit down and study, have a set place. That's my study place. And if you do this, you look at the place. When I come into my dining room, I don't look at it as really a place where I eat as much as if that's a place where I study. That's what happens to us. That's my study seat. And my kids all know. If I say my kids get something, it's where I sit and read. That's my place. And a place for prayer, and a place for tzedakah box, a place for chesed. The place for tzedakah could also be the table. If you have guests, then you're doing all three on the table, which is wonderful. Ve'asuli mekdash ve'shachanti betocham is an eternal mitzvah. It's not tied to sticks and stones. As the song says, B'levavi mishkan evne. In my heart I will build a mishkan. Even in your heart. They can't take it away from us. But it has to be kavua, it has to be set. Last year in this parasha, we spoke about the shulchan, the table. This year, I just want to talk a little bit about the menorah, just a couple of ideas about the menorah. So the menorah, the table is the source of panasa in the world. The table is a source of physical blessing. And the menorah is the source of chokhmah and Torah and intellectual blessing. Rabbi Shimon Shuav, he says something interesting. So we have these 6 branches of the menorah and the middle branch. So there's 7 in total. Shlosha kanim mitzideha. There are 3 branches on each side. It's a mahloket Rashi and the Rambam, whether the menorah was round or whether it was diagonal straight. Most of the pictures that you see out there, they're round menorahs. But the Rambam didn't hold it was round. The Rambam held it was like this. You ever see the menorahs like this? Straight out. That was how the Rambam held the menorah was. And based on my research, that probably is the right. This probably seems to be the right way how the menorah was. It wasn't round probably. It was probably straight. Shlosha kanim yotzi'im mitzideha. 3 branches come out from each side, but they all come from the middle branch. And so a little significance on this. Rav Shimon Schwab says, if the menorah represents wisdom, chokhmah, then each branch must represent a different type of wisdom. And his words are different names of wisdoms that I've encountered before. And these are the names he gives it. Chokhmah, wisdom. Etzah, advice. Yirat Hashem, fear of God, which is wisdom. There's a pasuk in Iyov, chapter 20, I think it's 28 in Iyov, that says the fear of God is the highest wisdom. Gevurah is strength, but my personal, honestly, it's a chabad. Based on learning Tanya, I interpret Gevurah as restraint more than strength. And restraint is the biggest strength. Ezo Givor, who is the mighty one, Hakobesh et Yitzro, someone who's able to control his Yetzer Hara. That's the strongest person, right? Oh, you got it? There you go. Yeah, that's good. I'm not crazy. I have to make sure I got the names right. 2 types of menorahs. So does it say here Rashi and the Rambam? Does it say who is who? Itai, what do you got here? How come it doesn't say who is this who's? There you go. That's the one. Ezo Gibor Hakobesh et Yisro. Who is strong? Someone who has willpower. Willpower means I'm not doing something. It's not who is strong who can pick up the heaviest irons. It's who is strong who cannot do something. That's the greatest strength, willpower. And so Givurah, which we say is strength, is really not strength. It's restraint. Givurah is drawing a line. In other words, when I'm eating a delicious apple pie, Givurah means that's my last bite. That's true strength. It's harder to do that than to lift weights. That's true strength. Or I'm not going to watch the movie that everyone else is watching. It's hard. So Givurah is restraint. It's boundaries. And the wisdom of setting boundaries. And the last of the 6 would be Binah, understanding. Binah, as we say, is to understand dabar mitoch dabar. Reading between the lines is Binah. Binah is building on your experiences to try to predict the future. Like we say a million times over, Paro called Yosef, Ish hacham v'navon. You're a wise person with Binah. You can tell the future. 7 years, another 7 years. Binah is Davin davar mitoch davar. So these are the 6 branches of wisdom of the menorah, according to Rav Shimon Schwab. And what's the middle branch? The middle branch would be the source of it all. Mimena, it's coming from it. The spirit of Hashem, Ruach Hashem, the wisdom of Hashem. Now, Rav Shimon Schwab was a student of Rav Shimshon Raphael Hirsch. Rav Shimshon Raphael Hirsch, Rav Samson Raphael Hirsch, he was a big believer, a lot like the Rambam in a way, in gathering all the knowledge. Even secular knowledge can be channeled towards Torah knowledge. Torah knowledge is on top, but secular knowledge, it fits in somewhere, if you understand it correctly. Rav Shimon Schwab says, in the name of Rav Shimshon Raphael Hirsch, there are many Jews who he called are closet Jews. That's what Rav Shimon Raphael Hirsch called them. A closet Jew means, in his words, when they're challenged by intellectuals, by professors, with secular claims, they run into the closet and hide because they're afraid to even confront Darwin, natural selection, all these things. They're closet Jews. And most people will run into a closet. I don't want to talk. I don't want to do it. Just leave me alone. But the true wisdom is to understand that it all comes from the middle stem of the menorah. And so Pirkei Avot says you have to be able to answer these people. You have to be able to understand. And so Rav Shimon Schwab gives an example how you have to confront any type of secular knowledge and understand it all comes from the maker. The source of knowledge is the source of all the knowledges. And so he says mathematics and science, that's also from Hashem. It's from the middle stem of the menorah. And so he gives one example, which I actually loved. He talks about carbon dating. I never really dived into carbon dating before. And so he says they carbon date something and they claim it's a billion years old. And so he says, I'll tell you the answer. This is how you have to open it up and get into it. If you get into any of these knowledges, you'll figure it out, he says. He says carbon dating. What is carbon dating? Basically, there are two types of isotopes in the atmosphere and in all organic beings. There are two types of entities, of carbon entities. There's C14 and there's C12. If anybody knows more about this than me, tell me now and I'll be quiet and you take over. I don't know. I'm not an expert. I'm just what he's. Okay. I did a little research afterwards. Carbon dating is there's C14 and there's C12. So there's different strands of carbon in the atmosphere. C12, carbon 12 is a very stable carbon, which means it doesn't go away. It stays around for a very long time. C14, carbon 14, is very unstable. It's radioactive. And so once the organic being dies, the C14 begins to disintegrate. It starts to go away. Okay, so in basic English terms, every living being has carbon 12 and carbon 14. When the thing dies, the carbon 12 stays. The carbon 14 slowly goes away. Carbon dating basically is scientists, they look in the atmosphere and they see C12 and C14, and there's a ratio. There's more 12 than 14. And then they look at living beings and they say, also, living being, you have C12 and C14 inside of you. But when something dies, the C14 leaks away and it goes away. If we can look at how much C14 is missing, we can try to figure out when it died. When did the leak start, basically? And so all they have to do is know the ratio of how much 14 there should be for how much 12 there is. Make sense? So the scientists, you can just YouTube all this after. That's what I did. The scientists, they phrase the leakage of C14. They have a phrase called half-life. Half-life means it's the amount of time where half of the C14 will go away. The half-life of an entity's C14, according to scientists, is 5,730 years minus or plus a variance of 40 years. This is not Torah talk. This is not Torah stuff. Put it on YouTube. Half of the C14 is supposed to leave something within around 5,000, between 573 or 577 something. Really, they're getting really close. What are we, 574? They're almost there. If you look at so I'm a real nerd, right? So if you look up the formulas to carbon date, the mathematic formulas, that's what they plug in. They plug in the C14 level divided by 5730 because that's the half-life rate, and then they try to figure out how much C14 there was a long time ago. Okay. So they take a tree, they take something that was alive, and they say, oh, wow, look how little C14 is there. Look how much C12 is there. By the way, this half-life, it doesn't mean that if you times 5730 by 2, it's going to be out of carbon-14, because that just means in the next 5730, 50% of what's left will leave. So it can take thousands and thousands of years to reach. Okay, so says Rav Shimon Schwab, he says we can handle carbon dating. We don't have to run into the closet. There's a couple of assumptions that they're using here that you could just ask them right back. Assumption number 1. Who says the rate of leakage has always been the same throughout time? Maybe carbon-14 is leaking at a slower rate now than it used to leak. If it was a fast leak way back then, and it's a slow leak now, when you see us drip, 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 drip from the roof, and then you see like a pool of water underneath, you say, wow, that drip must have been going on for like 10,000 years, right? Or it was a massive leak in the beginning, and now it's a drip, 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 drip. If the rate of C14 leakage was faster back in time, you can't prove anything. We got that? Don't forget about the flood. We talked about this the past couple of years in the Mabul. The Mabul reset everything. Even the atmosphere changed when the Mabul, when Hashem made the flood, everything changed. And so it very well could have been that before the flood, just like people were living 1,000 years, people were leaking 10 times at the rate that they're leaking C14 now. Number 1. Another assumption is you're assuming that there's no starting point of creation, that you can just keep going back as far as you can. But like we know, Hashem created the world, a mature world. When Adam HaRishon was born, he wasn't a baby with a bottle. He was a man. And so when Hashem created the world, Mount Everest wasn't a little pebble. It was Mount Everest. Or after Mabul, maybe, or whatever. Why would Hashem create a baby world? What's the point in that? And then he has to sit and wait for this guy to grow up. Hashem create the world. So Hashem already created a tree that looks like it was 1 billion years old. And Hashem possibly even created fossils, Rav Shimon Schwab says. Maybe even the fossils are created with creation. He created a full world. And so these are just 2 examples of how you can go and you can get involved. And so Rav Shimon Schwab says, the menorah tells us all branches of wisdom come from the central branch. So don't let anyone throw a wisdom at you that makes you run into the closet. You channel that wisdom to the Torah. Yeah.
They make sometimes small mistakes.
You think you have a gun, you move it a centimeter, the thing will land a mile away, right? Who told me this? Akiva, you told me this. If you're flying a jet, and you tilt the wheel a drop, you'll fly off of Earth, right? You told me this one time. When you're on such a high level and dealing with such big numbers, the slightest mistake will throw you completely off. Can I tell you something completely crazy? By the way, this has nothing to do with anything, because now that I mentioned this, I have to say this. Yeah? Okay, so we've been getting less crazy here as I think as time goes on. I don't know. But here's a crazy one for you. This is, by the way, this is associated with nothing. This is not pressure related. I have a relative who claims that the world is flat. All right? So, yeah, okay.
When was he born?
Yep. When he dies, we'll carbon date him and we'll find out. Huh? It's a whole thing. Flat Earth people, right? Hold on, guys. Here's a question he asked me that it's blowing my mind, okay? Here's a question. Because now that I mentioned the jet, he says, how could you fly a plane on cruise control if the world is round? So let's sink in for a second. If the world is round and you're flying on cruise control, you should fly off the Earth.
No gravity is keeping you down.
But what's putting the plane back down? He says every mile or so, you should have to tilt it down a little to stay on the ball.
No, it's not working like that.
Why?
No, because I was pulling you down.
If you're, hold on, I'm the jet, I'm straight like this, but the ball's going down and I'm still going up.
According to logic, you should also run it to the earth.
You should run to Earth. Yeah, that's what they say. If you go, I think it's like every 1,000 feet, you should lose an inch into Earth or something.
Isn't that what?
And he was like, wow, maybe the Earth is flat. What do you say, Akiva?
Not working like that.
Why?
You are so small, like that. And
Yeah, but a jet.
no, but it's
You have a jet that can go thousands of miles. All right, thank you.
Number of forces happening. You have the velocity, you have gravity, you have inertia. And
Yes.
that's all the plane.
But is that making it go down?
Yes.
That's making it go down?
What happens when you turn off the engine?
yeah.
That's all?
Yeah. There you go down.
Gravity.
The gravity gives the form.
Direct all your questions to that table, please.
Hey, now.
Orbital velocity I get, because orbital velocity, it's at the right, if the orbital velocity was faster, we would fly off of the solar system. But the force of orbital velocity versus gravity is keeping us at that perfect thing. So that I understand. But the plane thing,
If the plane is going down, it's plane.
Yeah.
What is the end? Has to be at the end.
oh, you saying if it's flat? Yeah, so they have answers. Yeah, so yeah, they have answers for this stuff, but it's even wackier than the Area 51 and all these.
Nobody. There's no end. That's true. Because it's
It's long range targeting. Have to take into account the curvature of the earth when they're making and shooting. If the world was flat.
Do they?
Yeah, you need it. Like, with the bullet drop.
Thank you, people.
And Joe, and the book of Joe.
Yeah, I know what he says. I know what he says. He who sits on the sphere of the earth, but they have an answer for that too, because I brought out my Tanakh, and I said, look, it says in Tanakh in two places, Emis and Job. And he says, no, I'm not saying it's not a sphere. It's a sphere, a flat sphere like this, like a blade.
Okay, but that's sounds. Yeah. Okay, ask hear what
That's what he said. We're losing everything here, guys.
you know. Yeah, but the moon is circling like a globe, so why wouldn't the earth be a globe? No, it's flat too. It's like this. Yeah.
So according to Rav Shimon Schwab, what we're doing now is good. We're trying to mesh. Now he's very careful. The Torah is in control. The Torah controls it. Everything else has to fit into the Torah puzzle. But there's a way. Okay, let's move on.
Is there any mention in
Earth? Yes.
earth being?
Yes, he just said it. Is Hayoshev al Chug haaretz, the pasuk said. Hayoshev al Chug haaretz. If you put it into Sefaria, you can find the pasuk.
Nice.
Hayoshev.
Is that water cannot curve,
Oh, you heard that? Well, gravity, no, her answer.
which makes sense, but
Yeah, but gravity will do that. But
Water curves.
water goes everywhere.
but that's the argument that it cannot curve.
You try to drop the water on the table, what does it do?
It goes everywhere. Yeah. Okay, weiter, as we say. So that's Rav Shimon Schwab, and a little crazy stuff, and carbon dating and interesting thing. Okay, let's get a little bit more Jewish. Banish High. The Banish High says a couple of more reasons for the 6 branches of the menorah with the central branch. Says the Banish High. First of all the spiritual blessing comes from the menorah. We know all the spiritual blessing of the week comes from Shabbat. And so Shabbat's in the middle, and on the right would be Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, and on the west would be Wednesday, Thursday, on the left would be Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. There's a well-known Arizal. The Arizal writes, and he says, well, they write in the name of the Arizal, that starting from Wednesday is already the power of next Shabbat. There's 3 levels. There's Nefesh, Ruach, and Neshama, right? And so we have 3 days to prepare those levels, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and then Shabbat And then we know from the Gemara, we don't even need the Arizal for this one. We know from the Gemara that Shabbat, the happiness of Shabbat lasts until Tuesday. As we know, there's a halacha by Havdalah. If you didn't make Havdalah yet, you didn't have grape juice, you go until Tuesday. And there's another Gemara that I mentioned a long time ago about eating double on Shabbat. Remember this one?
Yeah, but Yerushalayim said.
Neshama Yitera. That Gemara, Rashi also alludes there that it lingers around, the happiness of Shabbat lingers around. Okay, so it says the Ben Ish Chai, that's another symbolism of the menorah. Another one from the Ben Ish Chai is, you ever wondered to yourself, because I have, on Sukkot, when we do the Ushpizin, let's name the Ushpizin, yeah? Kavod, Nehemiah, Kavod. Abraham, Yitzhak, Yaakov, Moshe, Aharon, Yosef, David. Who made that order? Why is Moshe before and Aharon before Yosef? Yosef was born before them. Shouldn't it be Abraham, Yitzhak, Yaakov, Yosef, Moshe, Aharon, David?
It's according to his life.
Then Moshe should be first, no? Or Aharon. Why? Okay, he's older. Sorry, he's right. He's right. Abraham, Yitzhak, Yaakov, Yosef, Aharon, Moshe, and David. Says the Ben Ish Chai, it's the same seven of the menorah. All the source of blessing comes from the middle stem. Moshe's got to be in the middle. Abraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov. In the middle is Moshe, and then he could have Aharon, Yosef, and David. Why is Aharon before Yosef? I don't know. I was waiting for you, Itai. Moshe is the one that gives the blessing. And that Ushpizin question bothered me for many years. Well, one last one from the Ben Ish Chai. Together? You could say that. Shevet Achim Gam Yachad is Moshe and Aharon. I had these thoughts, but if I don't absolutely love something, I just leave it out. And lastly, says the Ben Ish Chai, what do we have now? The menorah, the Beit HaMikdash, is probably somewhere in the Vatican. And so all we have now is our daily prayers. And so our Amidah is the new menorah. And we know that the first three Berachot in the Amidah are the first, they're a pair, they're a match, they're a set. And the last three are also a set. The first three, we don't ask for anything in the first three. The last three, we don't ask for anything. It's the middle bunch that we ask for blessing from Hashem. And so it's the same thing. It's three on the right side, three on the left side, but it's not one in the middle. It's the whole middle of the Amidah. And so it says the Ben Ish Chai, we know that the menorah was made miksha. It was made from one solid piece of gold, not pieces. So too, he says, our Amidah, it shouldn't be different pieces. It should be one solid. That's why we don't talk in the Amidah. No interruptions. One solid Amidah, like one golden menorah. What time is it? Okay. Last thing for you for today. Did you read the Haftarah yesterday? This Haftarah we don't always get to read because if it falls down on Shekalim, we read Shekalim instead. The Haftarah yesterday is about Shlomo HaMelech building the temple. In Kings 1, chapter 5 and 6, I believe. There's an interesting pasuk there that I actually was expecting someone to ask me, but that person didn't ask me yesterday. The pasuk says in the Haftarah yesterday, when King Solomon made the temple, first it says, "V'Hashem natan chokhmah l'Shlomo." There we go back with the chokhmah, the wisdom. Hashem gave wisdom to Shlomo. V'yi shalom ben Hiram u'ben Shlomo. There was peace between Hiram and Shlomo. That's the Haftarah. That's the opening pasuk. There was peace between Hiram. Who's Hiram? Hiram was the non-Jewish king. Vayichletu b'rit shenehem, and they made a treaty. Well, Shlomo HaMelech had many treaties with many kings. Vaya'av HaMelech Shlomo mas mikol Yisrael. He put a tax on the people. It's a question whether this tax was a fiscal tax, was money, or it was a tax, it was a draft, it was people. Vayi hamas, because look at the next word. Vayi hamas, what was the tax? Shiloshim elef ish, 30,000 people. So the tax was people, or it was money to pay for the people. Vayishlahem levanona. What does that mean? Yeah, very simple. Sometimes the simple questions. Vayishlahem levanona. He sent all these 30,000 people to Lebanon. Aseret alafim b'chodesh alifot. I don't think it's the Lebanon of today. I believe it's the Syria of today. Aseret alafim b'chodesh halifot. 10,000 people in shifts. Chodesh Yul Lebanon. 10,000 at a time would go to Lebanon. Shinayim hadashim beto, and 2 months back home, and then they rotate. Vahi l'shlomo shiv'im elef noseh sada. Let's use the art scroll. Solomon has 70,000 carriers of burden, ushmonim elef hotzev bahar, and 80,000 quarry workers in the mountains. What are these guys doing? 70,000 people carrying, and 80,000 in the mountains. They were chiseling stones. Yes, right? They were mining. Let's see. Just right now, they're talking about the foundational stones for the temple, the big, huge stones. It's a lot of people, right? Aside from the chief officers, who were watching all the work, supervising, which were 3,300 people. And the king Solomon commanded, and they carried, it says over here, they uprooted huge stones, great stones. Avanim yekarot. It says in the English, heavy stones. Others people say valuable stones. Liyased habayit avnei gazit, for the foundation of the temple. 150,000 people just to bring the stones for the temple.
What area is this?
In the mountains of Lebanon.
Did they ever do research there? I'm wondering if I had a joke that
Like excavations. Well, like I said, it was Syria. They say it was Syria. That's what the commentaries say. I don't know. Let's keep going. Huh? Yeah, big stones in the bottom. Yeah.
Almost when you're sitting on the window on the big stone.
Yeah.
That's sad.
Huge.
And I think the guy said it's the same weight of 3 times.
How in the world? Yeah. Now, we know there's a commandment. There's a commandment in the Torah, lo tevnei aten gazit, which is at the end of Parashat Yitro. They were not allowed to cut the stones with metal. There's a mahloket whether that applied on the mountain site or whether it just applied in the temple site. There's a question how they got these stones out of the mountain. I mean, they didn't use metal. So in the Gemara, one opinion says they used the worm, the shamid worm. That's another question. Was the shamid worm only in the temple to make those stones smaller? Or was that even on the mountains to get these massive things out? A lot of commentaries say they used metal in the mountains. In the mountains, they had to get them out. Once they brought them inside to the temple in Yerushalayim, no more metal. Okay, let's keep going. The builders of Solomon and the builders of Hiram, the Gibelim and the Gibelites, and they got all ready, all the trees and all the stones. Now, what happened right before the Haftarah started? This is Kings 1, chapter 5:26. So we're 26 verses into chapter 5. What happens before this? Hiram, the king, not Jewish king, Hiram sends a message to Shlomo HaMelech saying, I was friends with your father and I would like peace with you. You can look this up for yourself in Kings 1, chapter 5. Shlomo HaMelech responds to him and he says, I would love to extend friendship to you. In addition, I would love to entail your services, please. I want your help building the temple. What does he need from Hiram to build the temple? King Solomon was massive. The trees in Lebanon, the trees in the Lebanon forest were the best cedar trees in the world. He wanted that wood specifically. Lebanese forest cedar trees. And according to some opinions, other types of trees also very good from Lebanon. Ke'erez ba'Lebanon yiskeh. These are famous trees. Lebanon cedars, the best. Number 2, he said, I would like your not wood choppers, lumbers are they called? Are they called? Not lumberjacks, a different word I saw. I forgot the name. No. I think lumbers they call them. Not artists, no. We'll call them lumberjacks. I want your lumberjacks to cut the trees down because they're more skilled than the Jewish lumberjacks. And so, Akiva, you're a Tanakh expert here. So how did he get these trees from the Lebanese forest, which is either in Syria or probably in Syria? How did he get them to Israel?
They tell you something crazy. It's a rock in Brazil, South America.
Yeah.
They say the troops of Iran, king of the blah 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 kingdom, is working for the Solomon king.
Wow.
In Brazil.
Really?
And they go to.
That's a long way.
Yeah, because it's a storm. They move it to. They lost and they go to Brazil.
Wow.
And it's a storm.
Says the Tanakh. Yanni, you ready for this? They had these massive Lebanese cedar trees out in, we'll call it Syria. They have to come down to Jerusalem. How in the world do they get those massive things down there? And so it says straight on Tanakh. It's straight on Pasuk. King Hiram says, I'll tell you exactly the way to do it. This is why you employ the non-Jews to do these types of jobs. He said, I'll tell you how we do it. What are you Jewish people going to sit and carry these trees? What are you, crazy? Make them into rafts and float them down to Israel. That's what he did. That's exactly what they did. So the trees that were for the building of the temple were floated in huge rafts. The water, I think they didn't care about the water damage. Was there water damage? They sprayed them with it dries out. And so King Hiram chopped all these trees with his guys, and all he asked for in return was food. That's what he asked for. If I do this for you, Shlomo Melech was wealthy beyond any measurement. I want you to pay for the food of my entire court. And it says the pasuk in Kings, it says the amount of food that he used to send, a crazy amount of food he would send over in return for these trees. And so we have Lebanese cedar trees. We have massive Lebanese rocks. We have the non-Jews doing it in the north. And we have 150,000 guys lugging huge rocks. Who are these guys? Who are these 150,000 guys? 80,000 cutters and 70,000 carriers. Well, the answer should be very obvious by now. If you want to do these things, don't employ the Jews. Right? They'll do a horrible job. Rashi says these 150,000. Now, don't get insulted until I finish this, okay? Rashi says the 150,000 people were gerim, were converts. However, they were not your usual convert. They were converts that were not accepted by the Jewish people. And they converted themselves anyway. What's the story behind them? I don't know if you recall, ladies and gentlemen, when we did our story about the Givonim. This is a long time ago, so maybe not. It was in very, very short. When Shaul killed Nov, when Shaul destroyed the entire city of Nov, Ira Kohanim. Remember this? When Shaul destroyed the entire city of Nov, what? Okay. David HaMelech was fleeing from his father-in-law Shaul. He was starving. He went to the city of Nov, which is inhabited only by the Kohanim, right? The Kohen over there gave him food, and the Kohen gave him a sword. Come on, tell me you remember this. Goliath's sword. Yes, thank you. Where was Goliath's sword? How did he get it? It was in the museum. In the temple, they had a museum. Hanging in the temple was Goliath's sword, and you're the guy that killed him. So if anyone can remove this thing from the museum, it's you. Take it. You want a weapon? Take it. And he gave him the lechem panim. He gave him the bread. He said, all I have is lechem panim, the showbread from the temple. But if you're starving, you're starving. And so he fed David and he gave him the sword. And then he was ratted upon. Someone told Shaul, he snitched. And he said, David's hanging out with the Kohanim there. And he went to the Kohanim, said, oh, no, you're the Kohanim? Doeg Adumi, yeah? He went to Doeg, Daga. Doeg Adumi was named because he was a Daga, he was a problem. Doeg reports to David, to Shaul, the Kohanim are on David's side, they're against you. Shaul goes to the city and he says, wipe out the entire city. I need a volunteer. Who volunteered? Doeg volunteered. I'll do it. He killed 70 Kohanim, and in the city were 7 converts, Givonim, and he killed them too. Because of that, later on, Hashem made a famine on the Jewish people and told David HaMelech this famine came about as punishment for slaying the 7 they were fake converts, really. They lied about being converts, just to be converted. So Hashem made a famine to punish David HaMelech, and he went to go appease them, their brothers and sisters. He said, what could we do to pay back for the 7 people that Shaul killed? They said, he killed 7 of us, we want 7 of his. David HaMelech killed 7 people of Shaul's family and hung them so everyone can see, and then the famine stopped. This is a Tanakh story. Fast forward a little bit. When the non-Jews around saw 7 of the royal family of Shaul hanging because they killed 7 converts, they said, this is the way the Jewish people treat converts in a good way. Because 7 converts were killed, they killed 7 royal people for all to see. We want to convert also. And we had tons of people that wanted to convert to Judaism. But the Beit Din held it wasn't for the right reasons. And they didn't accept these converts. These are the 150,000 people that Shlomo HaMelech comes and says to them, you're not accepted as converts. You're accepted by me to build the temple. Go be the cutters. Go be the carriers. And so from this alone, Rav Pam says, be very careful the way we treat converts. You see the ramifications. Hashem says 36 times in his Tanakh to treat the convert in a proper way. Says Rav Pam, especially this time of year when this Haftarah rolls around, because it's about to be Purim and it's about to be Pesach. And he writes and he says, when a person converts to Judaism, very frequently they cut off their entire family. They sever the ties with their family. They're alienated. They're all alone. You're sitting at your Pesach Seder with 50 people around the Seder. During your Purim Seudah, you have Mishloach Manot to all your cousins and aunts and uncles. Who does the convert sitting next to? Says the Rav Pam, you have to be their family. We have to be their family. And not only converts, in modern times, he says, in the Baal Teshuvah movement, there are many Baalei Teshuvah who are like converts. And we see it. There are a lot of people who come back to Judaism and they are forced to sever ties. It's not, we don't want this, but sometimes the family is very against it. Someone comes back to Judaism when he's 35 years old. All of his old friends he has to cut off. They're bad influences. He cuts off his friends. His family won't talk to him. He's all alone. Rav Pam says, a Baal Teshuvah like this is just like a convert. They left everything behind to join. And so we have to care for them and be there for them in the holidays. If they don't have family to be at their Seder, then we have to be their family. Says Rav Pam. 3, a ger, a convert, an orphan, and a widow. We got to be there for them. And so I think it's an amazing, as a last point, me personally, Shlomo HaMelech, who is the beacon of wisdom, he was the wisest man of all time. Reb Shimon Schwab just said, all wisdom comes from the central stem of the menorah. If you're really wise, you understand, you can channel any of the secular wisdoms towards the Torah. I don't think it's a coincidence that Shlomo HaMelech Bedafka, the wisest person of all time, he takes Hiram, a non-Jew, and he says, I want your guys to cut my Lebanese trees for this temple. He takes the converts who are not really converts halfway, and he says, I want you guys to help me get the stones for the temple. Shlomo HaMelech is showing us every single type of external wisdom really can be channeled for the temple. And the temple is for everyone. The Mishkan is for us only. That's a big difference between Mishkan and the temple. The Mishkan was only for us, but the Bet HaMikdash is for the entire world, for Jews and non-Jews. And Shlomo HaMelech, when he's building it, you're talking about the foundational stones. The foundation of the temple is it belongs to the whole world. And so the workers, 150,000 workers, are not born Jews. The people who chop the trees are not born Jews. That's a wise man. And so there's a little snippet. Now I do another time, not now. If you remind me, you guys remind me. There's an amazing midrash about this guy Hiram, but there's no time to get into it now. So let's put it.
In Solomon said when the inauguration of the temple, the becoming temple, everybody from every
Everyone.
nation
Everyone.
came here and pray. You want
So the foundation, the word foundation is the foundational stones, was not Jewish. The foundation of the temple was not Jewish. We have to remind us one day to talk about Hiram, because Hiram has an amazing backstory, but we're running out of time today. So have a nice week, everyone. We'll see you back next week with Hashem. Peshat Tesaveh.